Call the meeting to order. This is a regularly scheduled, called and convened Greer City Council meeting held this evening, January the 23rd, 2024. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have a full agenda, but I think we will move through it in a timely fashion. We appreciate your attendance here this evening, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to ask Councilwoman Judy Albert, if she would please, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by an invocation. If you would, please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight. We just thank you for the day that you've given us. We thank you for each blessing that you've bestowed upon each of us and that you've bestowed upon our city. We thank you for the employees here, and we pray, dear Lord, that you will be with us through this meeting and that you will help us to consider and think wisely in the things that we do. We thank you again, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Ms. Duncan, do we have anybody to appear in public forum this evening?
No, sir.
With that then, council, let's move to the minutes. You have the minutes from the council meeting held on January 9th, 2024. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So move.
And a second.
Second.
Any items of note for the clerk? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes. Council, you have the departmental reports contained in your packet, and I was searching all over for Ms. Howell to give that report, and I see Mr. Seiferd's going to join us this evening. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. It's been a little while.
Yes. Well, we appreciate you coming this evening to give us an overview of our financial report. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm pleased to bring to you the financial summary for December 31st, 2023. Starting with the general fund, we have revenue recorded of $7.7 million and expenditures of $22.1 million. That amount is 2% under budget. And you'll also notice in your reports we have a cumulative combined overall variance compared to our benchmarks of a negative $2.9 million. The carrying cash balance in the general fund is $5.7 million. Moving to the hospitality fund, our revenue is 4% over budget at an amount of $1.8 million, with related expenditures of $2.8 million and a carrying cash balance of $1.6 million. And then finally, in our stormwater fund, we have revenue of $306,000, expenditures of $11.4 million, which at this moment is 11% over budget, and that is due to our annual transfers occurring at the very beginning of the year. That will come down and we'll be at or under budget by the end of the year as we continue through fiscal 24. Stormwater fund has a carrying cash balance of $1.8 million. Be happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Floor is open for questions. Hearing none, we thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Council, let's move to the administrator's report. Mr. Merriman.
Council, Mayor, thank you very much. I'll keep it brief. The only thing I want to remind Council of is February 6th is Hometown Legislative Action Day. It is the annual meeting that we have in Columbia with the Municipal Association, an opportunity to visit with our local delegation on a number of those matters that are pressing to local government. So, again, I know a number of you have signed up for that day, if not all of you. So just by way of reminder, it is February 6th. So we're 2 weeks removed from that. Mr. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you, sir. Council, with that, let's move to old business. We have 3 items of old business before us this evening, the first of which is the second and final reading of ordinance number 1-2024. This is an ordinance to change the zoning classification of a certain property owned by Yarborough Properties, LLC, located at 122 Sunset Avenue from suburban neighborhood to traditional neighborhood. Ms. Byers joins us for that conversation. The floor is yours.
There are no updates.
There are no updates to that. This comes as a second reading. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Comments? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. Second item before us is the second and final reading of ordinance number 2-2024. This is an ordinance to change the zoning classification of certain properties owned by Kappa SFR LLC located at 108 and 116 Brown Street from suburban neighborhood to traditional neighborhood. Any new or additional information in that regard?
No, Mayor Danner.
No new or additional information in regards to the second reading of ordinance number 2-24. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
And a second. Floor is open for discussion. Questions? Comments? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. Second and final reading of ordinance number 3-2024. This is an ordinance to change the zoning classification of a certain property owned by Liba and German Garcia located at 501 New Woodruff Road from CG, which is commercial general, to MD, medium density residential. Any new or additional information in regards to ordinance 3-2024?
There are no updates.
No updates. Council, I'll entertain a motion to receive second and final reading of ordinance number 3-2024.
So moved.
I'll need a second.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion.
This was the parcel that had a good bit of density or had the possibility to go relatively dense compared to just the one commercial piece that would have been on there before.
That's correct. And it's also the one with 2 existing homes that were condemned.
And what is do we know what the requirement is for stormwater on something like this? Or is there going to be like a retention pond that's going to be required if we add several houses in this particular area? Or how do they work through that from here?
So typically, if you're subdividing 4 or more lots, it triggers a site development plan, which has full stormwater requirements, and they would go through the typical site development plan process. So usually that 4 lots is the trigger.
Okay, so anything north of 4, so if he adds more than 2 to this particular property, it would trigger the
That's
site
correct.
development? Okay, gotcha.
You said the existing homes were condemned or are condemned?
But we've received indication that they are hoping to bring them up to conformance.
Right. Others? Discussion? Comments? Questions? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker,
Yes.
Mr. Hopper,
Yes.
Mr. Dumas,
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert, Mayor Danner.
Yes. Thank you. Let's move to items of new business, the first of which is the first and final reading of resolution number 3-2024. This is a resolution to accept Saddlebrook Farm subdivision streets, namely Backer Court, Crossbuck Trail, Red Horse Way, Palmer Road Drive, Turfway Drive, Stirrup Court, Mint Julep Corp. Into the City of Greer street system. Mr. Grant joins us along with Mr. Buchanan for the first and final reading of resolution number 3-2024.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to introduce to you our newest team member in the engineering department. David Buchanan joined us about 6 months ago as a civil engineer, and he's doing a great job. He's jumped in with both feet, and he was so excited about coming to his first council meeting. He even agreed to participate, so he's going to be presenting these items to you.
Thank you, Steve, and Mr. Mayor and Council. The resolution, the items before you in your packet show Southbrook Farms and all the different roads in it. It is a combination of, my apologies, 7 different roads, all residential. The entire subdivision is built out, and I believe the project is fully closed out. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments.
Mr. Buchanan, have you personally inspected each one of these roads?
I have, sir.
All right. That's what we're looking for. Council, I'll entertain a motion to receive the first and final reading of Resolution Number 3-2024.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion.
These new subdivisions, when the streets are being poured by the developer, do we go out and check any of that at that time? It just seems when you look at the streets that are being repaved, so many times it's the newer
Sure.
subdivisions versus the older.
Sure.
And just looking at some of the past ones.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering, I'm sure, as everything does, everything changes in the makeup of what they do.
Sure.
So, yeah.
To answer your question, yes, we're out there. You may be, they usually put the binder coat down while the houses are under construction, and at the very end, they'll come back and put the surface coat on, so that may be what you're thinking as repaving. It's actually not repaving, they're putting the final surface on, so,
Yes.
while like I said, when the houses are under construction, they've got the binder course down, it leaves it down about 2 inches, and then they come back right at the very end and put the 2-inch surface on. So, I think that might be what you're referring to.
And our,
It just seems like when it came time around, that certain streets needed repaving that was maybe in a newer subdivision than some of the others. So, in times past,
okay.
there has been.
As far as new subdivisions, ma'am, our inspectors are out there multiple times a week, typically. As Steve mentioned, during the initial installation of what we refer to as the binder course, the first layer of asphalt, they are down there and they require what's known as a proof roll. It's basically a compaction test for the residuing soils that have been installed for the road. And then they're out there during the installation of typically both asphalt lifts, along with third-party inspectors.
Others? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes. Council, let's move to the second item, which is the first and final reading of Resolution Number 4-2024, a resolution to accept Reserve at Redcroft subdivision streets, namely Vals Court Drive, Gresby Drive Court, Walsley Lane, Denton Court, Marlett Court, Aspley Court, Stevedore Court, and into the city, and all of those into the city of the Greer Street system. Mr. Buchanan.
Yes, sir. So this is the Reserve at Redcroft. This project started in 2018. It is located off of Westmore Road and roughly 2,200 feet from the intersection of Brockman Road. This is in Council District 3. It is fully built out such that all utilities and houses are constructed. This is 63 lots in total. We have inspected it. This is 7 roads containing Vals Court, which is approximately 890 feet, Grisby Court, which is approximately 159 feet, Walsley Lane, 290 feet, Denton Court, 256 feet, Marlett Court, 417 feet, Apsley Court, 343 feet, Starvo Court, 526. These are to be accepted into the city with your approval.
Comes with a recommendation from staff. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Floor is open for question. Comments?
Greasby Court.
Discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis,
Yes.
Miss Albert,
Yes.
Mayor Danner.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Mayor.
sir. Welcome aboard. Council, the next item before us this evening is the first reading of ordinance number 5-2024. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 18 Businesses, Section 18 through 311 through Section 18-430 of the Greer City Code of Ordinances. Mr. Seifert joins us for this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you, we've brought for your consideration ordinance number 5-2024. We commonly refer to this as our peddler's ordinance. As you review the ordinance, you can look at it and look at the amendments. Our prior peddler's ordinance had very little rules associated with it. And our staff has done some comparisons between us and other counties. We feel that it is important to come into similar situations as the cities around us and to do our due diligence for the safety of for the public of this business model. Peddlers, we don't have a whole lot of them on any given year. We may get one or two in a year, or in a busy year where the students are out selling the magazines and things like that, we could have upwards of 50. So not a heavy burden, but we wanted to be sure that we were doing our due diligence on this business model for our citizens.
Council, this comes with a recommendation from staff for the purpose of discussion. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion.
I'm really pleased to see we're addressing this, doubling back on this. Just within our neighborhood, the last few years, we've had some pretty aggressive companies coming in, dumping teams out, and multiple knocks, and just so having some sort of enforcement mechanism that way, I think, is very appropriate. Would we anticipate dealing with this on a complaint-driven basis?
Yes, sir. In the ordinance, one of the regulations where we would respond under complaint-driven, but when they are in the ordinance, there are, I think, 5 complaints, is when we will move to a suspension revocation process. That's one of the items where we would do some enforcement if they were being 5 complaints.
I did read everything yesterday. I can't remember specifically. Can you speak to how, if in any way, this does affect kids going door to door selling cookie dough for school or that kind of thing?
There's an exemption for the fundraisers, fairs, festivals, the nonprofit status of the organization behind those, and they're exempt from the business license regulations.
Candy bars for school, that
Right.
kind of thing. Good to go. Okay, great.
So, Mr. Seifert, again, as much as I've read through it at this point, I noticed that a business license application and payment for business license is going to be required of the peddlers or the sponsor visit. How would that be applicable to, let's say, a Verizon or to a cable provider?
If they, when the application process for the peddler itself is based on the sponsor organization and the relationship between the two. So if the person that is out there doing the peddling is an employee, that individual will not be required to get a peddler's license for him specifically because they're covered as an employee under the business license of the parent organization, in your example, Verizon. Conversely, like the magazine companies, they just send out students, but the company is not hiring them as employees. They're all independent contractors. And in that scenario, each one of those would have to have their own peddler's license and would fall under this regulation.
So phone companies and communication companies, which are generally exempt from our business license structure, are they not? Would not have to.
They're not exempt, no, sir. We just don't license them locally. They're licensed through the state, through the municipal association. The local retail stores that are selling hard goods are licensed locally, but the service provider is licensed through the state program, but they're enforced the same way.
Okay, so those people would be employees of that organization through the licensing at the state level?
Right.
Okay, all right. Others?
That's like the guys that go around about your roof and things like that, when you're, after we've had hailstorms, does that relate to them too? Or?
No, ma'am, they're not peddlers. They are roofers and contractors. So they would fall under our normal business license ordinance.
Give me an example of a complaint that we get about a peddler.
As Mr. Hopper just said, aggressive behavior, multiple knocks.
No, I mean selling what?
Pest control.
Well, pest control is not a peddler necessarily. They would be employees of working for a company. But the biggest one that we see are the college kids doing magazines, subscriptions.
Door to door?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. This also regulates the collection at intersections, which is prohibited. But you see it going on, but we had no mechanism to, that's a life and safety issue, but we haven't had a way to control that.
So this is helpful. So sale of a service, that type of thing, that is not the intent of this regulation.
If they are peddling a service, it does include that. It is the sale of a service or good or whatever they are selling.
So what's that? So if there was, in my example, pest control, when does it turn into peddling? What's that line?
Well, yeah, peddling is, yes, going to door by definition. So the activity is controlled. They just would not necessarily need a peddler's license individually. But the activity would be fall under the ordinance for all of those complaints.
So the
or those
individual
actions.
working for the pest control company wouldn't need, as an individual.
Would not need a peddler's license, but they are peddling, so they would fall under the regulations of the activity.
Got it.
So again, I'm not splitting hairs, but I was just trying to think of an example. Two realtors that come to my door that want to ask me if I want to sell my house. Is that peddling? If they're doing up and down the street?
By definition, yes, sir. They're going door to door by whatever means.
All right, so we've got this one and another one. I've read through both of them. I'm looking right quick. Fundraisers, fairs, and festivals has been stricken in this one, right?
Correct.
So this excludes, this would exclude any type of Girl Scouts selling cookies in front of Lowe's or
Walmart or
Bi-Lo or
Yes.
whatever. Okay. What if they are selling an item? If they are selling donuts to raise money for the Vietnam Veterans Association?
As long as the sponsor organization is the nonprofit, they would be exempt.
And I may be mixing this up with the other one, but they also have to have approval from the place that they are located. Didn't I see that, or is that in the other one that's coming before us?
That's generally for the mobile food units.
Okay. All right.
In the peddler's ordinance, one of the exemptions, for instance, like the Ren Fair, as long as all of those peddlers associated with the Ren Fair are contained within the boundaries of where the fair is taking place, they would fall under the license issued or the permit issued to the Ren Fair. But as soon as they step outside of that boundary, then they're subject to the peddler's license, or peddler's ordinance, excuse me.
So if they're part of the farmer's market, they're part of the farmer's market?
Correct, correct. And then there are peddlers that do set up in locations instead of going from door to door sometimes. And if they are on commercial property, or they are required to be on commercial property, and they have to have permission from the property owner to be located there too.
Okay.
But they don't have to have a peddler's license.
Yes, sir.
They do?
Yes, they're supposed to. If they're selling goods in any mobile fashion.
In a mobile fashion.
They're on fruits and vegetables, or they buy them in Florida on the back of a trailer. They bring them up here, set up in a parking lot, and sell them to the public. Happens quite frequently.
Mr. Seifert, in our neighborhood, we've had companies, different types of service, put a little flyer in a baggie with a rock and just drive down the road and throw it in your driveway. I mean, it's not door to door per se, but it's house to house, I would argue.
Littering.
Does that fall under this at all?
It would, at a minimum, it would fall under our business license ordinance because they are attempting to do activity to raise funds, to raise revenue. It may or may not necessarily be, peddling. But if we are aware of it and they are attempting to do business, then we will enforce it under the business license regulations at a minimum.
So they are soliciting business under our code, and so, if they don't have a business license,
They should have one.
Okay.
Others? Questions? Comments? Further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Yes. Mayor Danner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Council, let's move to first reading of ordinance number 6-2024. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 18, Businesses of the City of Greer Code of Ordinances by adding Article 12, Mobile Food Courts, Section 18.501 through Section 18.524 to establish certain rules and regulations for mobile food courts. Mr. Seifert joins us for that conversation. Floor is yours, sir.
Again, thank you, Mayor and Council. In our business license ordinance, which is Chapter 18, or business license code is Chapter 18, we do not have any code or regulation addressing the mobile food units at all. Again, we've looked at surrounding cities wanting to be similar in nature. And again, it used to not be an issue for us, but we are licensing and inspecting about 100 units per year right now. We expect that to grow as the popularity of food trucks and mobile food units increases. Again, for us, it's a life and safety issue, making that they're inspected by the business license staff and the fire marshal, making sure they have the proper life and safety equipment. And again, feel that this is important for us to do our due diligence on the business interacting with the public.
Council, for the purpose of discussion, I'll entertain a motion to receive.
A motion.
And a second.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion.
I read this yesterday again, and I'm scanning back through. I'm not seeing, how does them collecting and submitting taxes to us, how do we handle that currently, and how would it change, if any way?
There is no change in the way they're doing it currently to where after the ordinance. They are in business, they're doing sales of prepared food that falls under, hospitality tax, which is required. So as they are applying for their business license, we're also setting up the hospitality account And then at the end of the event or at the end of the month, or, it's based on how much they collect in a given period. They either remit monthly, quarterly, or annually, depending on the volume of sales. So that method does not change.
That remains unchanged.
Correct.
Others?
One question on the section of Section G with concerning the background checks. I know there may be food truck owners that potentially have a record that contains, felony drug crimes, some of these items that are listed, and it's saying regardless of the time frame, does that count even if it's been expunged from their record? I mean, does this still apply to them?
If it's expunged, it legally doesn't exist, so it would not.
Others? David, Mr. Seifert, if there's an area that is established for the purpose of hosting food providers that would allow either a truck and or this says mobile food unit. I'm thinking a 20-foot container that had been converted into a kitchen. How does this apply to those types of units? It's not truly mobile, I don't get. Well, I guess it could be. It could be pulled up on the back of a truck. I guess my question is, if somebody's using a container in a location, is that considered a restaurant or is that fall under a food truck unit?
It would really depend on how they are built and how they are structured. If it is a container that has a permanent foundation, then it would fall under the building codes and then the business license code as a restaurant. If it is still mobile, it's still a restaurant, but it falls under the mobile subsection of restaurants, which is the mobile food unit. So it just depends on how they're structured.
Okay.
How they're built.
So if it's not on a permanent foundation, that's the qualifying event.
Yep.
Okay. Others? Questions? Comments? Discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Ms. Albert? Mayor Danner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Schaefer comes to join us for item 5 this evening, the first reading of ordinance number 8-2024. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of Chapter 78, Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Property of the Greer City Code of Ordinances. This pertains to street performances that take place on sidewalks, plazas, and other public spaces in the downtown central business district. Floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We currently do not have any regulations regarding street performances to take place downtown outside of non-event times, and we have received an increase in requests to do so. This new ordinance would allow for those performances to take place on downtown sidewalks and other public spaces by obtaining a permit. We are also proposing to change the submission deadline for the special event permit application, which is required for an organization to complete if they are requesting a road closure for an event. So we would like to change that from 30 days prior to 60 days prior to the event to allow for more time for staff to review and then also schedule staff to work those events. Happy to answer any questions.
For the purpose of discussion, I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
And a second.
Second?
Floor is open for discussion.
What type of performers have requested this? I mean, I don't, I think about our sidewalks, and I don't see too much room for.
Yeah, so mainly
Dancing
musicians. Yes, so there are a few, mainly a few street corners in the area that would work very well for musicians. So primarily, playing guitars or saxophone. If someone wanted to read poetry, they could do that as well. But more than likely, it's going to be playing music and singing.
So there is a fee for the permit.
Yes, sir.
That's one time in the calendar year?
In the calendar year, correct. So they can go out and play as often as they would like during that calendar year.
And they have to have a criminal record check.
That's correct.
And that costs them too, doesn't it?
It does.
Have the businesses, have they been questioned about how they feel about the street performers, of businesses on the streets and all?
So not all the businesses have, but we do know that there are businesses who already go ahead and hire live performers and musicians and bring them, either inside of their stores or either, if there's a special event, they might have them right outside. So we do believe that this would add to the vibrancy of downtown. But one of the biggest things in this ordinance is that in order for a performer to set up directly outside of a business, they would have to obtain permission from that business owner in order to set up in front of their business. Otherwise, they'll just need to move to another area.
This doesn't apply to the ones inside, though, does it?
No, sir. Just the one on the public sidewalks. And they're also not allowed in the dining encroachment areas.
I can't speak for everybody downtown, but I'd say this would be generally welcomed by downtown business owners. I know of one business that it would be welcomed by, for sure. Absolutely.
So, this also covers parades and picketing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a separate portion. The parades would fall under the special event permit application, and then this would be a separate section specifically for street performances.
Okay. So my question is in regards to specifically picketing and parades as well that would be held on public property, i.e. streets and or sidewalks. We don't address that I see at this point open carry. I know in our last Christmas parade that was an issue that was identified to me, and I would suspect that if it were a picketing event, that might be of concern to our police department as well. Do we address that? I didn't see it anywhere in this. Do we address that specifically in this?
I don't believe it is addressed in the current ordinance under picketing. Typically, most groups will reach out to the police department in advance and work closely with Lieutenant or Sergeant Richardson when we do receive these requests, but it is something that we can look at adding that language.
I know that from time to time they have a band out behind the Cartwright Food Hall. Does that affect that?
So that portion behind Cartwright, if I'm recalling correctly, is part of private property. So they would go through the permission of that property owner in order to continue having bands in that area.
They wouldn't have to have the permit though?
No, sir.
Okay. I also noticed on here that you can only use battery-powered amplification.
Yes.
Are you aware how many of those are available on Earth? Not many.
Yeah,
About everything requires AC.
right. The goal is to just create like a nice environment where the music isn't too loud, but to give people the opportunity to where it can be slightly amplified. Otherwise, you're going to be looking at paying staff to come out, drop extension cords, have staff there monitoring, and then making sure everything gets picked back up.
I think that's a big barrier. I think you can tone down AC powered amplification wherever you need to. I don't know anybody that has a battery powered amplifier.
So I can speak to that.
Okay, that'd
actually.
be great. Thank you.
So we actually have some folks, this past year, we've had some folks into the alley at Abbott's, and one of the gentlemen, I believe you may have even referenced him, plays saxophone, and he has a battery-powered amplification system that he brings. I am not a performer that way, so I mean, I don't dispute what you're saying, Riley. I know you are a performer and in a band that way. I'd say, kind of to your point, I mean, the whole point here is in a public space, right? And so a performer in a public space, they need to be responsible for their own power, their own equipment, et cetera, rather than, I mean, the only other choice is to tie into power that the taxpayers pay for, and I'm not in favor of that, or to tie into the power that a business owner is paying for, and I doubt.
Well, if you're paying a permit fee, what are you getting for the fee? I mean,
The ability to perform in a public place in our downtown.
And when we were creating this ordinance and going through the guidelines and everything, we did look at other cities in the area like Greenville, Anderson, and those cities are not providing electricity for the performers.
this is Greer.
Yes.
You say they are performing or not?
They are not providing.
Not providing that,
Yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
So this wouldn't apply to any entertainment at a city function outside.
Correct. This is outside of non-event times. So say there's a festival taking place in downtown and there's a street performer who wants to come in and play, they would need to receive permission from the event organizer prior to the event to show up and play. So as long as the organizer is fine with that, that's okay. But otherwise, these are only to take place outside of non-event times.
Would there be a allotted number per evening or something? Or maybe we have somebody at each building or something?
Right. Currently, there isn't an allotted number, but there is a time frame. So if there's a musician on one corner, they can only play for 1 hour, and then they would need to move to another location. So that will kind of help with moving some of the musicians around.
I assume we'd enforce that on a complaint-driven basis, too, if there's
Correct.
a turf dispute between performers in a prime spot in downtown. So
That's correct.
if there's one performer in downtown and they stay there for 3 hours, we're not going to care. Yeah.
And it's for individuals only.
Individuals, groups can perform, but each individual in that group would need to obtain a permit.
Wow. So you got two guys playing guitar and singing together. They each got to have a permit.
Yes, sir.
Even though they have one name for their act.
Correct.
That's overboard. I'm sorry.
Are there guidelines as to what type of performances or?
The only guidelines would be sticking to playing music, acting, singing, reading poetry, things like that. Of course, no vulgar music or anything like that is going to be offensive or threatening to the public.
So if you got people out there doing Shakespeare, they each got to have a permit.
Correct.
I guess without the rules and regulations, anybody could go do it anyway. Is that right?
Yes, right now, without, an ordinance, we don't have a way to say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't. So either way, if this is approved, we'll know how to move forward. If it's not, we can at least say that, we don't have an ordinance that allows for this.
Have we seen this to be a growing thing in Greer
Yes.
downtown?
Yes, we have received multiple inquiries to go and play, primarily by musicians, and then we have had some people show up as well to play.
Well, I did see where they, couldn't ask for money, but they can have their little
For tips, yes.
place to put your money,
Yes.
like you see in movies on the big towns. Yeah.
I understand the need for some type of control, but I believe this has gone a bit overboard.
Well, I was kind of concerned about it causing lots of issues, period. But if there's nothing there to control it, the way things are going throughout the nation now, you might need something to control it.
Right, and we want this to add to the vibrancy of downtown. We don't want this to hinder, people coming in and out of stores, and that's why, one reason why we put the specific wording in place of they have to get the permission from a business owner in order to set up directly outside of their store, because we don't want, any business, being deterred.
So the businesses would be responsible for informing the entertainers that they need a permit?
No, sir. If a musician or performer came up and wanted to set up outside of Southern Sisters Boutique, they would need to go inside, ask the store owners for permission to set up right there, and then if they say yes, they're good, they would have a permit with them that's laminated. They have to have it displayed during their entire performance time.
Where's that permit come from?
It will come from the tourism office.
And how far in advance do they need to do that?
14 days.
Kind of takes spontaneity out of it, doesn't it?
Well, once you get your permit, you can show up anytime you want.
Does this, I'm assuming this applies to acts that we would engage as well, too?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I would assume that it would apply to acts that we engage as well, too?
Not as part of, so city-sponsored events, we work to contract them out, so we have a signed contract agreement, all the checks, and we're typically paying them to play. So those people who are playing as part of a city event would not have to have this permit. Now, if they wanted to go, downtown the next Saturday and play outside of an event time, then they would need a permit for that.
So for instance, I was sitting here thinking about specifically like Christmas at Greer Station. I think it was Bob Jones choir chorus or
Yes.
something.
That was...
The high schoolers aren't going to need individual permits because that's part of the event.
Right, yeah, that was part of a Greer Station event, so they did not need permits for that.
So the jazz band that plays, they don't need it.
Correct. As long as it's part of an organized event, whether it be a city event, Arts and Eats, something like that, they would not need a permit. It's just if they are coming downtown outside of those event times.
But to Riley's point, a caroling group would have to have, everybody that's a part of the group would have to get a permit. If
Yes,
it's
sir. Currently
the
with
Victor
how...
Church Choir, they've all got to have permits.
Yes, currently with how the wording is, that is the case. It's also because we are requiring a background check. So that's why the individual permits are there.
And how long does it take to get that?
Do you know?
Immediate?
Who doesn't?
I mean, how do you get it?
How do you get one?
An application online through SLED.
And it costs how much? So we're discouraging them from coming down and playing if they're not going to make a whole lot more than $25.
The wage is already pretty low. So what are you looking for in a background check? What if you got a guy who's served time but he's out of jail? Does that exclude him or what?
Yeah.
he's paid his time.
Now, kind of piggyback off what Riley's saying, you know, my biggest concern now is I don't want us to give the impression that we're creating an oasis, that we only want perfect people coming to be a part of downtown. So they can't be peddlers now because of background checks. They can't have a food truck because of background checks. Now you can't have, even on your background for the application, it says multiple driving citations / accidents within the last 15 years. That disqualifies you.
So currently what we would be looking at primarily is something that would disqualify, and this is all just in the interest of public safety. So someone who has committed attempted murder, domestic violence, child neglect, felony theft, things like that. Under the current guidelines, if an applicant is to be found to have been convicted of any of the following offenses, he or she can be reviewed by the city for further approval, and like kind of what you mentioned, driving under the influence of last 15 years, multiple driving citations. So it's not like an immediate no, but there are certain things that we do need to look out for, especially since they will be interacting with the public.
But this is all at the discretion of the administrator, is it not?
Yes.
That's where it's written.
How do we assess the cost of it? Is it just something
We followed the other cities in the area, so we were trying to stay in line with that. So it is something that we can look to change.
I saw, we set the permit fee as part of the schedule of fees. Did I miss what the initial fee would be somehow?
Initially, what we were thinking was $50 or $25 if you're a current student with a valid ID.
And that was chosen because it's in line with other
In line,
surrounding
yes, sir.
municipalities?
And like on the criminal record checks, how far would you go back on that? I mean, if somebody hadn't done anything in 5, 7, 10 years, but they did something that long ago, how are you going to handle that? I mean, is there a time period that you're putting on the criminal record checks? Or? Some people try to do better.
Yeah.
They don't always get the opportunity.
Well, we were talking about a permit for each member of an organization, but it says no group performances, which seems to preclude having a 3-man choir.
David, you said 7 years.
Well, based on hours, it's not addressed for time period. I don't know the time period from SLED, how they look back. Heather's saying it's 7 years. So there's that 7-year window that SLED would report it to us.
And I guess it would depend too on the type of crime or whatever like that.
Right. The ones that are detailed in our ordinances, and I'm not as familiar with the Busker ordinance, but they're of the aggravated and high nature. There's not moving violations on ours, and it's the safety of the public that we're concerned with for felonies, abuse, assault, battery, those type things.
But we're quick to point out we don't discriminate.
I'll just say real quick, I like to create proactive policy and do different things like that, but I haven't heard anything about this being an issue or businesses being distracted by performers or hearing comments from the public that they feel endangered by these artists and I'm not even aware that there have been any artists that there have been. What is the scene like?
What does it seem like?
Yeah, tell me what do you?
Fairly eclectic, and it's weather driven. It can come in spurts. But I can guarantee you, in my opinion, I can guarantee you that it's going to continue increasing to be something that, well, whatever we do or don't do with this, it's going to be something that we see more and more in downtown. Absolutely. But absolutely, we see it already now.
I agree. I would agree that it's an amenity to our downtown. We have had, multiple different types of people that have performed downtown, and I know the reception to those has been good, both from folks that are just visiting downtown as well as the merchants. It is a way of creating an atmosphere that typically leads to people staying longer in the downtown area and spending more time in the stores and spending more money in restaurants and that sort of thing. So I have no doubt that it has its place. I'm wondering if we're at a point that we've got the basis for a good ordinance that just needs a little bit more massaging. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse tonight, but I sure would like to know whether or not the police have any angst about us not addressing this issue about carrying guns at a picketing event. What if we got two conflicting picketing events downtown? Seems to me like you got two groups of armed people on either side of the street that could become a problem. I have a problem with people carrying guns in a Christmas parade. I think we need to address that. We may have the foundation for something here, but I'm not sure that I'm ready to support it tonight.
If you've got to give that advance notice to get a permit, and you've got to get your background check, it seems to me that it's going to be something to discourage people, very much of it, in all honesty. Plus, the fact that you've got to put up money to do all that.
Was there a logistical reason that we know of why the 14 days? I'm assuming that's best practices gathered from others as well. Why that length of time before someone can perform?
Yes, just to allow time for staff to review. It doesn't mean that, it would take 14 days necessarily to get an approval, but just to give that buffer, depending on, how many applications we've received and everything.
I can see that you would need some lead time. I mean, you don't want to have 9 people downtown one Saturday night and none the next. I mean, I can understand that.
But once they're permitted, 9 could show up at one time.
Well, that's
They
true.
could, they could, and just spread out. Because they don't sign up for allotted times.
And Riley, it does prohibit groups.
Well, it says no group
Reading?
performances.
I didn't catch that.
Yes, and I see what you're saying there on the application. It does say no group performances. It should not say that. The ordinance does allow for group performances. It's just each individual does have to have the permit. So if this does pass, we will have to change that on the application so people know groups are allowed.
Does our current Christmas parade provide sanitation facilities?
Currently, they do not have the portable restrooms, no.
That this would be required of them in the future?
Nothing was changed with that portion of the ordinance. I don't know if it's just because it's a moving event, if they haven't been required to do so in the past.
They just have to identify whether or not they're going to do it then?
Right,
Because
if
it
they're
says
working-
applicant shall include but not be limited to the following, and it says in Item 8, provisions for sanitary facilities, crowd, noise, traffic control, and parking.
Yeah, so it is something that we can require. Some, not the parade necessarily, but some other events in downtown, what they do is they work with the local businesses, and if they will open up their restrooms, sometimes that can decrease the amount of portable restrooms that they would need on site during the event.
Your pleasure, council. We've got a motion and a second.
If it's something we definitely need, I think it needs a little work.
Mr. Mayor, there's nothing that would preclude staff from either taking a tabled ordinance back or council taking action on it tonight in first reading and us taking the comments that you made and bring them back in an amended form for second reading.
So could we just email specific tweaks or suggestions to you or to?
Yeah, I think
Lindsay in the
anything
interim?
would be acceptable. I know that we've heard enough tonight to get started on a couple issues that council has articulated, but absolutely, just like anything else, we would love to hear from you via email or give us a call, and we'll talk through these things. So as far as action tonight goes, again, the mayor's absolutely right. It's council's pleasure. If you wanted to take an action on this at first reading, it's your prerogative. If you wanted to table this, it's your prerogative.
Given the fact that we're dealing with this early enough in the year that I don't think we're going to have an overwhelming number of folks that are going to be applying to street perform in January or February, council, it's your pleasure if you want to take a first reading tonight and allow staff time to make some decisions, or we want to hold this over.
I'll say that generally speaking, I appreciate the effort, and again, I think I'm glad that we're addressing this. I think it is appropriate for us to be addressing this. I do understand some of the issues and agree with some of the issues. Right? I think we need to find that balance, strike that balance of the barrier to entry, and the burdensome nature. I think taking some of, maybe Riley would disagree with, Mr. Best would disagree with me. I think taking some of the spontaneity out of it is actually a good thing for our downtown, but making that barrier to entry as low as possible and accessible as possible is also a good thing too. So,
well, in defense of his position on spontaneity, it's always been my experience that creatives are less structured people and may not plan as well. And so, and I think that's the beauty of music, and it gives people the opportunity to show up and perform or, read poetry or whatever. But I think even in the comments, we've said that it's a positive thing, and it's been something that's been supported by business, and there's not been, to my knowledge, complaints associated with it or, issues with turf wars with performers or different things like that. And, I guess my opinion on it is at this point it's not an issue. So I don't, like I said, I like to proactively get out in front of things, but I just don't see it as a big issue at this point. So
street performing in general or problems from street performances isn't an issue, because street performances is absolutely an issue in our municipality today. Sure.
Define issue.
Complaints, turf wars, I don't know. Some of the things I think that this is trying to get out ahead of are the issues that I think this is trying to address.
In our discussion tonight, we have covered a number of different things, and I may have missed this in one of the ordinances that we considered. But I noticed in one of them, and I don't know if it's Ordinance 8, 2024 or not, it prohibited chalk drawings.
That's in this one.
Why are we prohibiting chalk drawings?
Just for the sake of people, possibly not cleaning up after themselves, what they are drawing. If it's going to be left for staff to have to clean it up.
So if it's a commissioned event or it's a public event that we controlled,
Right.
that
We
it
know
would
that'll
be
be
all
taken-
right.
we know
We
it'll be
just don't
taken
want
care of.
people putting hopscotch things on the street. Okay, all right. Council, we got a motion and a second on the floor for 8-2024. Your prerogative as to how we proceed at this point.
I'd like to table it.
If you'd like to make that in the form of a motion, it will need to we will need a motion and a second to vote to table it.
We'll take back the existing motion second.
If the motion to table,
Mr. Dumas made the initial motion. Mr. Hopper seconded the motion.
okay.
Functionally, would it be easier to hold it over or to table?
This point is really kind of
It's 6 of one, half dozen of another at this point,
Yeah,
yeah.
at this point, so-
Holding it over would essentially equate to tabling it.
I think in this particular case, if council is inclined to hold this over, I think if Mr. Dumas amended his motion.
Could amend his
to
motion and you
reflect
could
that,
second
and
that.
you would second that, then we can bring this back to council.
And bring it back to
amended.
council.
We calling it a holdover or table? What do we?
Let's just say where council's going to request we hold this over.
Hold it over.
To a future meeting.
Yeah,
All right.
let's do that.
Well, I will amend my motion to hold this item over for a future meeting.
Okay.
I'll second.
And you'll amend your second to that. All right. Vote for us on 8-2024 at this point is to hold over for changes and further discussion. Questions?
I do want to say, if there are structured creatives and I offended you, I apologize. Please do not call or email me, okay?
There's one or two somewhere.
There's got to be. So if you're a structured creative, good job.
Comments? Discussion? Further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
Yes.
Miss Albert? Mayor Danner?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Shaver.
Thank you.
Last item of regular business this evening is a bid summary. This is for the rebranding for the city of Greer. Mr. Reno Deaton joins us for that conversation. Floor is yours, sir.
Mayor and Council, good evening. This comes before you tonight as a request to award a contract to Chandler Thinks to rebrand the city of Greer in response to RFP. The contract amount is $76,300. In effect, we would replace our brand, what we know as the Swish G, with a new brand, logo, brand guidelines, and tagline.
Comes as a request from staff. I'll entertain a motion to receive.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Floor is open for discussion.
This is the first I've heard of this. Has this been brought to us previously?
Mr. Bettis, I think over the last possibly 6 years, this has been attempted to varying degrees of success, but this is the first time the rebranding process has been brought to council since I've been here for your consideration.
Have we had a problem with our existing branding?
I don't know that there's a problem per se. I do think that as the city continues to grow and expand in virtually every facet of local government, I do think that after 20 years or so of the branding that we've had and the guidelines that we've been under, which have been arguably very fluid, up to and including other entities having a very similar branding to ours. I would point to the chamber as being one, that it is now time in our history and trajectory as a city that we look at how we present ourselves both to the constituents we serve and to the other municipalities in the Southeast. So I think, so arguably, no, I don't think per se that the brand is broken, but I do think we have reached a point, an inflection point in our history where I think that the time is nigh to take a look at how we do that.
Who had the swoosh G first, us or the chamber?
Oh, we had it first. And I don't want to, I'm not going to vilify the chamber on that, but what I'm saying is that, you know, over time, we have seen that you lose control of the brand. One of the services that these structured creatives will be helping us with is determining a brand guideline on how that will be used, not only if from an administrative standpoint, but from a Parks and Rec standpoint to police and fire. So this will be a very structured, very intentional branding effort.
We're going to change all the G's, is that what you're saying?
We don't know what it'll look like, but we do know that part of that, this will be an iterative process, but part of that will, the end result will be the Swiss G as we know it, will no longer be the Swiss G as we know it.
Well, that seems like that's going to be like a Prisma nightmare. We'll be changing signs and cars and everything.
Oh, well.
At great expense, I might add.
Yeah, that's absolutely a part of this process. Now, the beauty of it is that it's not a snap your fingers type effort. We will go through the process and determine what that brand's going to look like, and then there will be a rollout period over a number of years where everything that we do and everything that's branded will be slowly transitioned to the new brand. It's not something that we will budget for in one fiscal year to accomplish. But as we continue to build new buildings, put new signs on things, expand our programs, this branding, this is going to be part of that effort.
Seems to me for a long time that Greer and Gaffney and Georgia and Green Bay have survived using the same logo.
I think if you go back and look at all of the helmets of Green Bay and Gaffney and Greer and Georgia, there's been modifications to all of them, and their helmets have changed shade, and their helmets have changed face mask colors, and the logos have changed, albeit small. They've all modified over the years.
I will say that it is time for some new direction, and you know, while we have overwhelmingly used the swoosh G, it was pointed out to me that the logo on some of our public safety equipment, we've got different logos on some of our equipment, and that's been pointed out to me. So I do know that there is a need for us to rethink this and look at rebranding, and whether or not the swoosh G has a part of that, we will hopefully find out.
Well, this seems to me to be the kind of problem that a municipality that has every other problem in front of it solved, paid for, and taken care of, then you sit down and look at something like this. This just doesn't seem that huge of a thing in the scheme of what we do.
I was the council representative on this committee that helped to work through, I think we had 15 submissions.
That's correct.
And whittled it down to Chandler Thinks. And I'll just tell you, as the group, as a collective that Reno put together, I just heard in one voice that everybody recognized that the city had grown, and there's been a lot of changes, and that we're in this unique position to determine what our brand is now, what it is that we communicate to people and what we want to say about our city. And I just heard that loud and clear, that people that served on that committee said it's time to move forward and for the branding to match where Greer is now and where we're headed in the future. And so appreciative for the invite, and thanks for the committee that you put together. I think they did a real good job.
Yes, sir.
Others? Comments?
I actually have a hard time wrapping my head around the rebranding idea, and you really got to kind of bring this home for me because I'm not really seeing how rebranding is the solution. I know Simpsonville went through a rebranding process, maybe 2 years now, and I'm not really seeing what return on investment they received from it. Riley brings up a great point. If we phase this in, I mean, 74,000 is just the tip of the iceberg. Ultimately, it's going to be hundreds, potentially hundreds of thousands. I'm not exactly sure what that number is. Well, yeah, G there, G here 7 times. I mean, I'm just not seeing what is the goalpost that really triggered to say rebranding is where we need to head because, I mean, Greer's not the city. I mean, it's the people that are here, the businesses that are here. That's our brand. So how do we really convince me of why rebranding is the way to go?
Certainly, thank you. I believe it's an opportunity to elevate our messaging, elevate our communication, elevate our storytelling, to really tell the people, and by the people I mean our citizens, the folks who live here, the folks who work here, folks who interact here every day, what Greer is and what it includes. The process here presented by Chandler Thinks is one that will be inclusive. One of the reasons that they were selected for this bid is their work relative to research, engaging stakeholders, engaging the public to make sure that a new brand reflects all facets of the city of Greer, all people, all folks in the community, all businesses, all folks at the table to get the opinion about what Greer is and what it really is. I would argue that the Swishi has served its purpose and gotten you here, and it's time now for sort of the next stage to begin to tell Greer's story of what it is and what it's becoming. And a new brand, new tagline, a cohesive structure with all the sub-departments is important, I believe, in terms of elevating that communication opportunity that's before us.
So, you know the G that Greenville uses. How does that fill all that stuff you just said? What does that say when you see that little squiggle G?
Yeah, so glad I don't work for the city of Greenville. Certainly glad that I work for the city of Greer, and really excited, Mr. Bettis, about what this opportunity presents in terms of galvanizing the community to make sure that we are creating a brand that the community supports, galvanizing our team, our staff that represents the values of our employees, galvanizing the opportunities that are before us in terms of new projects, new events and activities that will be happening here in this community. I think this is a real opportunity for us, again, to elevate what we do and take advantage of the time that we're in.
I didn't know there was a problem.
I would offer that the little squiggly that you mentioned about one of our neighboring communities is probably one of the best brands for a city that I have ever seen.
I like it.
You know,
but it doesn't say
their whole
said.
Their whole motif is built around that river, and you see that little squiggly G, and you know exactly what it is.
Now, I see we have 3 bids. Are we looking at which bid? I mean, there's a big range between 80,000 and 23,000.
Chandler Thinks was the firm selected by our rebranding steering committee. We started with 15 proposals. Initially went through a process to whittle that down to 3 finalists. Then entertained direct interviews, person to person, with those 3 finalists. And our rebranding steering committee unanimously selected Chandler Thinks to recommend to you for approval.
The 76,000.
That's correct.
Can you give me examples of what exact data are they looking at and are going to compile to really quantify this investment?
Yeah, I don't know that exact data is a term that I would use. I think what they'll do is they'll be here on site to have stakeholder meetings with various groups. There is a process they've identified that includes what they refer to as the branding profile wheel, where they identify essentially the 8 major elements of branding. This is a company, by the way, that has done more than 300 place branding exercises throughout the country, experts in the field. They'll be here on site, spend some time with some various stakeholder groups, to get feedback, opinions on what Greer is, looking at branding as a storytelling component, so that we're not just sort of slapping a logo down, but really creating a brand that tells Greer's story. And again, gives us that trend to elevate our communication.
So in regards to the applicant, I looked them up, and they're out of Tennessee. Went on their website, and they push on the whole story, push telling their story. Honestly, I wasn't super impressed with their website, but how do we have assurance of the team we're going to be working with? Because I see it all the time, because it happens with me, in which you put an RFP out there, you fly a team out, they tell you they have the pitch hitters out there, and you think those are the ones you're going to be working with, and then come to find out those are not actually the guys you're going to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. What assurance do we have that the people that are pitching the idea also are going to be ones we work with? And I do have a concern that they're out of Tennessee, because they can bring an unbiased opinion, but still we need people to understand the local economy and what Greer, Greenville, Spartanburg means. I'm not quite sure if that can happen or not, or it'll take some time. And maybe that's why it's $74,000, because they're going to have to do a lot of research to understand where we are. Could you kind of help me understand all that as well?
Certainly. So the people component was one of the three sort of initial factors, screening factors that we used to look at the 15 total applicants, the people involved, the processes they proposed, and then samples of their work. That got us to our final three. In bringing in the teams for interviews, our two goals were to really understand who we were going to be working with, and then to understand the timeline and the costs that were going to be involved. So we'll continue that process through the actual contract process to make sure that we're affirming all of those points that we'll actually be working with those folks that we've identified and spent so much time with. In terms of the substance of the proposal, one of the reasons, again, that this steering committee recommended Chandler Thinks was the degree to which they represented the research component of developing brand, logo, storyline, et cetera. The work that we will be going into, really getting to Greer, understanding us, knowing who we are, knowing what our history is, but also understanding what our aspirational goals are, and using all that within the framework of stakeholder meetings to craft a brand that represents all of us.
I think one of the things that, and I think to your line of questioning is that for me, and it may not be a direct result of this, but I hope that it would engage us to also think about what our mission and our vision and our values are in terms of how that's reflected in our statements to our community about who we are and what we do and how we do it. I know it has been at least 20 years since we've had that conversation, and I know that one of our value statements or mission statements was we are a great place to live, work, and play or something. And I think most of us were at the Municipal Association meeting where the man talked about, that is probably the most overused mission statement in the entire world. He could find 350, hits on that with one search. I think it is time that we revisit that as a council and as a community, and also there's an opportunity here for us to re-engage our employee base, whether or not it is Team Greer or another effort as well too in culture. It's one of the things that we have built our workforce on. I think it's one of the things that we should continue to build our workforce on. I think it has served us well. I think it will continue to serve us well, whatever that is. But the emphasis on Team Greer is something that I hope that this might bring some new life to as well too.
I mean, I totally agree that we need to assess, what our branding is. But I mean, I like the swoosh G. I'm used to it. Call me maybe I'm a little old fashioned with the G, but I'm just not convinced that, I mean, we've got a whole marketing department. I mean, about a year and a half ago, I brought up the fact that there was a lot of inefficiencies just from a messaging standpoint that never really, I mean, I know we're doing a lot better job than before, but it didn't take $74,000 for me to see that we had 25 different Facebook accounts. Parks and Recs had one, Greer Police Department had one. You just go through the list and you start adding up all the followers on each one of them. That was a 10-minute exercise that, yeah, there's inefficiencies, but I'm just not sure if rebranding and what is that going to render for us. What is the goalpost going to be that this was a success?
Thank you. Others? Comments?
Vern Smith gave it to us for free. It's the center of the universe.
Might be what they come up with.
I copyrighted that.
Okay. We'll leave it alone then. Comments? Questions? Further discussion? Ms. Duncan?
Mr. Booker?
No.
Mr. Hopper?
Yes.
Mr. Dumas?
Yes.
Mr. Bettis?
No.
Miss Albert?
No.
Mayor Danner?
Yes.
Thank you.
Fails. Council, in executive session, we have one matter this evening. We have concluded our regular business at this point. I'll entertain a motion that we go into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion that we enter into executive session to discuss a contractual matter pertaining to administration as allowed by state statute, section 30-470A2.
Mayor Danner?
Yes. We will stay in this room for our executive session. We will notify you when executive session